About 4.5 years ago, I found myself in this abandoned housing project. It was heavily occupied by graffiti writers. I got introduced to graffiti and street art. And so I started coming back out there, trying to duplicate some of the graffiti. And initially I felt like I was no good at the lettering and the traditional styles of graffiti. But then I was like, I used to paint, I used to do portraits. Let me see if I can do what I did with a paintbrush, with a spray can. My name is Brandan, Bmike Odums. I'm a visual artist from New Orleans, and I just put a little paint where it ain't. So we're in the Bywater neighborhood of New Orleans. This is called Studio B. One side of it is open to the public, where my first solo show is on display. And then the other side of it is the space that I create out of. Graffiti has a long history that I respect and appreciate so much. Rule breakers were always associated with something of like a revolutionary thought. But I felt like creating an image of Dr. King in an abandoned housing project was way more effective to me than to paint my name. And that's not to be critical of those who went in that space to paint their names. It just felt like for me and my truth, I felt more of a responsibility to use that moment to break a rule for a reason. And that's when I started to separate stylistically, intentionally with what I saw to be traditional graffiti. These are all like wooden cutouts. These are all people who champion, in my opinion, the idea of their words having power. And so really this was like a way to kind of say, what if Nikki Giovanni was a graffiti writer? Like what type of words would we be confronted with? Or if John Lennon or Malcolm X, like what would we be seeing in the public spaces if these individuals were bombing the streets, as they say? You know, I like the juxtaposition of painting someone like Muhammad Ali and then painting someone right across the room, a regular person from New Orleans, but painting them in the same scale, in the same way. And in a lot of ways, it's to show that there's value in the lionized characters, but then there's value in the everyday person that's existing, that's trying to survive. When I was painting at abandoned projects, New Orleans at the time was speaking about post-Katrina recovery as if everyone who left had the opportunity to return. And all those abandoned spaces, those abandoned apartments and homes should have reminded us that these were families, these were people who lived here that aren't here. Where are they now? Those walls represented a certain narrative that we were trying to bring to the forefront. These are all the original sheetrock walls from that particular project. The Housing Authority of New Orleans, after they threatened to arrest me and made me write this formal letter of apology, they contacted me and said, yo, we're about to demolish that building, but we can cut out all the walls that you painted. It's kind of fascinating to be back here because so like this was done on 5/19/13, Malcolm X's birthday. This was the first piece that I did out there. And even the technique, like I was using markers for details because I wasn't too confident with like the spray can. We would climb up to the second floor because the first floors were all like destroyed from the water. And we would climb up to the second floor, and this is what it began to look like, where every room just kind of had its own art on it, whether it was done by me or other artists. Then it became like messages like this. Like this was written in 1966. We want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings, and here we were until 2013. I think this was the last thing I did in that space. This is around the time I was getting in trouble for it, and I was finishing up this piece. And it said, don't let me be misunderstood. It's definitely surprised me where I am now. And I think that's what's so humbling about those walls being in that last room. I would never have imagined that 4.5, 5 years later, that I would be standing here. This being Studio B, the solo show is Ephemeral Eternal. In the idea of ephemeral eternal, it's like taking these ephemeral moments, these temporary moments, and figuring out what connects it to eternity. Like the legacy of Dr. King, who died when he was young, who lived a long time ago, but yet everyone who walked in this building, they know exactly who that is painted on the wall. So there's a part of his life that's ephemeral, but then there's a larger part that's eternal. There's ideas, there's these themes that are eternal. I'm inspired by a legacy where stakes are always too high to just waste time.